So let's start the presentation.
Okay. Agroecology.
Agroecology. So let's start with a brief introduction to this presentation. Agroecology encompasses a rich diversity of approaches and practices regarding food production and beyond the food system at large. Your main goal for this presentation is going to be finding your parents in this complex reality. This you'll be able to do through learning the key principles and the levers of agroecology, as well as understanding how you can best apply them to your own situation and your own goals. My commitment is to help you gain new skills that are going to be impactful going forward, whether in your professional or in your personal life. So, the plan of this presentation is first, we will see the emergence of agroecology. It means some historics from the beginning of this agroecology. Then I will present you different approaches, how you can implement agroecology. We will see agroforestry, livestock production, and at the end, the transition to agroecology. So let's start with the emergence of agroecology. So how agroecology emerged agroecology is deeply rooted in our ancestral practices. It means that at the same time, agroecology, as it is understood today, started taking place in 1970 and more prominently in the 1980s. Through the emergence of agrarian social movements, especially in Mexico and Brazil, and of research projects by scientists in North America. So what really happened? Several agronomists and agroecologists who got involved in research projects, especially in Latin America, sought to develop an alternative development model based on the critical assessment of the impacts and the Green Revolution. And the contribution of American ecologist Stefan Grisman and the Chilean entomologist Miguel Altieri are especially considered as seminal to the global agroecology movement. The scientific framework that they have been developing has provided social actors who pursue agroecological practices with a frame of reference to envision a viable alternative to the dominant conventional agricultural model. So after that, we can address different impacts of agricultural modernization, especially various kinds of factors and approaches, which includes scientific and technical innovation, as well as socioeconomic revendications. Agroecology seeks to develop new food production methods to address environmental issues, to provide a social, economic, and political alternative in response to the socioeconomic disruptions caused by industrial agriculture, and to revisit the relationship between humanity and nature after modern technology turned nature from a complex living organism into tool of productions. So that's the brief emergence of agroecology. But for agricultural modernization, we have today have a different environmental impact. The modernization of agriculture through chemistry and mechanization gave way to an unparalleled growth of production and the yield around the world. By the same token, it has also caused extensive environmental damage. We cannot, for example, nitrate and phosphorus runoff from cultivated fields are the biggest source of water pollution as are pesticides or streaming from chemically intensive farming practices. Furthermore, agriculture is the biggest source of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. Before transportation and electricity generation, the main source of this information is from United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. It is also a major culprit in the loss of biodiversity around the world. Agriculture and their means its own future agro-terror by degrading topsoil, draining fresh water through increased salinity, depleting aquifers, and reducing the genetic diversity of plants and animals. These are the main impact of agricultural modernization, and that's why the practice of agroecology have emerged. Awareness of the negative impact of agriculture on the environment started around the 1970. It led to some significant shifts in understanding agricultural production. But this agriculture modernization has also different socio-environmental impact. These have been growing more acute since the late 1980s. The uncertain impact of genetically modified organisms, GMO, deployed in food crops around the world, together with food scarce and the public health crises, such as the emergence of superbugs, all linked to the industrialization of the food system, are compounded by deep, long-term trends like climate change, the global shift away from fossil fuels in the post of COP21 era, and also the population growth. This is this challenging context inside of which agroecology may provide some much needed tools for all communities and nations of the earth to establish their food security and the food sovereignty while sustainably caring for their ecosystems. So, why it is important to implement agroforestry as a social and economic transition? Because first, agroecology gives us a framework to design not only an economic transformation, but also a social and economic transition. Through applying agroecological principles, agroecosystems can be designed so as to foster biodiversity. Markets can be organized to allow small farmers to participate. The agriculture industry can be structured to not push for the use of inputs. Farming doesn't have to be synonymous with poverty. We have also some cultural impact of agricultural organization because agriculture modernization is the outcome of a specific type of a relationship of mankind with the environment. In the modern Western world, man is the manager of nature, positioned at the center of the world. Such a vision of nature was brought forth by the French Enlightenment mindset before spreading throughout the Western civilization. Agroecology, therefore, offers a great illustration of how things have been evolving. In 1950, the rationalization of agriculture, food security is a priority in most of Europe. It's about making sure that national communities can feed themselves. The war effort has led to technological and chemical advances that can be applied to increase production. Nature as an asset to be managed. We cannot perform base agriculture when hand in hand with a management-oriented vision of nature. The vision was based on a technicist approach whereby technology dominates. The environment is viewed as an asset and the goal is to control it. Agriculture as the reflection of society's cultural choices. Agriculture is one of the elements that reflect the society's cultural choices. Our worldview is a construction in social sciences, the processes through which we can make sense of the world are called representations. Let's now see the second part of this presentation, which is the various approaches to agroecology. So how we can approach agroecology? There are different kind of approaches of agroecology. We can distinguish three dimensions. We can see in the picture of the presentation agroecology as a scientific discipline, the social and political movements, and as a set of practices. We can note scientific discipline, movement, and practice. So, in this picture, we can see different, how is it agroecology definition? It is especially related to environment and agriculture. Various definition of agroecology. There are different several points of view, but also an evolution of the concept in time. So, what is agroecology? There are different definitions. Here, first from an alternative approach, different definition from Miguel Alteri, Stephen Gleisman, which is the most important, is that the application of agroecological concept and principle to design and management of sustainable ecosystems. And we see the science of designing and managing sustainable food systems. The main definition for system Gleisman is the sense of applying ecological concepts and principles to the design and management of sustainable food systems. But what is the main definition? The core principles of agroecology include recycling nutrients and energy on the farm rather than introduction external inputs integrating crops and livestock, diversifying species and genetic resources in ecosystem over time and space, and focusing on interactions and productivity across the agricultural system rather than focusing on individual species. That's the main definition of agroecology that we need to remember. There are different scientific approaches, so we can abstract by applying ecological methods and concepts to agriculture. Because some agronomists believe agroecological approaches lacked efficiency and overlooked the farmer's role in the ecosystem. And the collaboration between agronomy and ecology is now crucial to address environmental challenges and achieve sustainable, resource-efficient agricultural practices. Agroecology is related to agronomy because agroecology as a science was first born at the juncture between agronomy and ecology. In order to mobilize ecological processes in ecosystems, it was necessary to draw from ecology, which is about the study of ecological processes, and from agronomy, which is about the study of ecosystems. Agronomists like Altieri and Gleisman pioneered that scientific vision of agroecology. And the agronomy and the agroecology are also have different relations because agronomists who mainly focus on the physical and chemical states of the ecosystems and on the biology of cultivated species started widening their focus to look for a system of biological processes. For example, as we see in this presentation, we can mobilize the ability of worms to create porosity in the soil instead of tilling, so we can sow cover crops to smooth our weeds instead of using herbicides. And agroecology changed the game after all that, because suddenly it's about studying how the biodiversity of cultivated ecosystems can be valued and improved. Let's now see what is agroforestry, which is the main application of agroecology. Agroforestry is the association of trees and crops on an agricultural plot of land. Agroforestry is a form of farmland use that combines tree plantations with crops and pastures. Is the definition from Dupraz and Layag in 2008. Another definition of agroforestry is the tree species associations and the crops or pastures to obtain products and services useful to mankind, which is the definition from Torque Bio in 2007. Based on this definition, a wide variety of agroforestry developments can be explored, stemming from three types of kind of variables. First, tree management approach, planting area, and density. These practices of agroforestry also include agro-silvicultural systems, silvopastoral, agro-silvopastoral, and orchard agro-pastoral systems. Trees may have been planted in the field or may derive from spontaneous vegetation on land left fallow, or found in woods and crops, or in forest and forest edges. For example, in temperature agroforestry systems, we may find fruit trees for annual crops and timber trees that will generate income in the medium or long term. Moreover, trees planted in the agroforestry plantation can provide a much wider range of direct or indirect production. We can see in this picture, for example, some timber, firewood, fruits, animal litter, paper, medicinal components. And the intercropping can be perennial or pluriannual. Under the tree canopy, crops, herbaceous, and scrubby vegetation can also be cultivated for complementary productions or service plants. This is an example of agroforestry and implementation of agroecology. The first picture is a plantation in England, and the other one is agroforestry in Cameroon. We can see some crops and also the forest around the crops, and that's an example of agroforestry. They make intercropping of forest around the crop. There are different agroforestry, different types of agroforestry. For example, crops under the tree cover, agroforest and agroforestry gardens, agroforestry in a linear arrangement, animal agroforestry, sequential agroforestry, and how farmer can implement agroforestry. The farmer who decides to plant trees in his field, in other words, who is going into agroforestry, will have to learn to manage another plant species within this time. This involves long-term management of his plants plot in addition to the management of annual crops. So it means that you need to know the technical itinerary for all the crops, but not only the main annual crops he wants to plant. And why is agroforestry considered to be a form of agroecology? Because agroforestry is one of the solutions to meet the challenge of ecological intensification of agroecosystems, producing more and better with fewer inputs. So the provisioning services of the diversification of farmers' revenue sources and food security, and the related services of water quality and flow control. The main supporting services are soil conservation and pest control, and the cultural services are landscape and heritage. These are the main challenge we can get from agroforestry. Let's see an example of a case study of agroforestry system with a kitchen. You can see in the picture that there is some chicken and some trees around the land. So trees provide many services to the chicken farm, especially to protect the chicken from wind, rain, and heat, to provide them with landmarks, encouraging the birds to explore the full range of their environments, and capture parts of the effluent through their root system. So there is different trees that can be considered in this project here. The wind, encouraged by the entrance of the chicken crop to encourage the birds to explore the full range. Hedge crops or even lawn trees for fruit and wood production and animal welfare. The tree species may be chosen based on the desired function, for example, producing timber, camel chips wood, firewood, or fruit to feed the chicken. About the food production for human consumption, there is a strict rules that can apply in particular to avoid the risk of salmonella from the chicken. Let's now see livestock production, optimizing the value of land diversity through animal husbandry. Animal husbandry makes only discrete appearances in agroecology. However, farms animal present us with many opportunities to optimize the value of land, whether it is cultivated or not, or its product and the byproducts. Farm animals consume plant byproducts that are unsuitable for human consumption, such as choy, oilseed, and bran. Pastoral herbs with animal essentially feeding on the spontaneous vegetation naturally available on pastures, transform resources that are unfit for human consumption into highly valuable proteins and micronutrients. So what is the relation of agroecology and livestock production? Animal farming is a major land use strategy because from animal farming we can use the land, different type of lands, moorland, fodder crops, crop residue. The moorland is characterized by growing vegetation that associates both layers of grass and shrubs. Fodder crops, whether herbs or trees, are exclusively destined to feed the livestock. The crop residue, even crops that are dedicated to human consumption, can provide fodder and or litter for livestock, and the crop residue is what remains on the ground after harvest. Examples: choice, greens, seeds, and sometimes seedlings. Grassland, steppe rangeland, woodland, wetland. These are all the main examples of application of livestock on land. When grazing herbivores optimize the value of the land, what's the stake? So historically, grazing livestock emerged as a way to optimize the productive value of the land through producing the proteins and the quality of nutrients for man, and improving farmland soils and its productivity with organic inputs from farm animals. Starting at the beginning of the 20th century, technology advances have led to the intensification of crop production. The practice of pastoral fallow has largely been abandoned. It has been replaced by crop rotations, where leguminous crops are used to replenish the soil before being harvested for animal fodder. Simultaneously, chemical inputs have replaced animals to fertilize the fields. So there are two major structural changes, especially the spatial dissociation between crop production and animal husbandry. And such a dissociation raises challenges about soil fertility management on the crop production side, the prolonged use of chemical inputs, which don't provide long-term soil improvement on par with organic inputs, result in soil depletion. And we cannot also do essential ecological services from pastures, especially nurturing biodiversity and capturing carbon, thus reducing greenhouse gas emissions caused by livestock and contributing to climate change mitigation. That's the main important advantages when combining livestock and the plantation from agronomy. In this context, it seems appropriate to question current animal husbandry practices and pay special attention to land diversity. Now let's see the intercropping relation, intercrop and agroecology. Intercropping, what does it mean? Intercropping is not a recent invention in agriculture. It's been practiced for a very long time in many different regions around the world. So look into some of the ecological processes that explain why intercropping presents a real advantage, both in terms of crop production and soil management. The main definition of intercropping is designates agricultural systems where two different kinds of plants, at least, are grown in the same area and at the same time. Intercropping systems have been around for a long time everywhere in the world. This is the main advantages of intercropping. You can see in this picture vegetable beds in this urban agricultural plot in Burkina Faso. The grower intercrops lettuce, cabbage, and amaranth. These three varieties doesn't compete with the lettuce and the cabbage and can be harvested each week as a green vegetable, providing the farmer with a minimum guaranteed weekly income. So the main advantage of intercropping here is to the economics of the farmers. He can enjoy diversifying his food and the source of his income. Intercropping can also help provide stable revenue year after year in the face of unforeseen weather or market events. For instance, in the case of Haitian garden, sorghum and peanut, and especially cassava, all fall-resistant crops are considered by the local farmer as the ultimate food security insurance in dry years. We can see for another example, which is fodder crops grown by ranchers to feed their cattle. Example, sowing different plants together allows harvests that are less weather dependent. The second main advantages of intercropping with regard to the ecological and economic processes at work in the field. It can help address issues and the pests and weeds, and make it possible to reduce chemical inputs while improving crop quality. Diverse crops grown together can also make a different and complementary use of resources like light, water, and nutrients. We can see an example of intercropping in this photo. It is a plot in China where the farmers obtain higher yields when intercropping millet and soybean than when growing them separately. So, what is the strategies for activating ecological processes in intercropping? We cannot accrue nitrogen in intercropping systems. It means that the farmer will plant crop which linked to nitrogen, particularly in the frequent case of intercropping legumes like Fabaceae family and the non-leguminous plant like Poaceae or Gramineae or cereal, for example. The reason that the type of legume cereal intercropping is interesting is because of the ability of legumes to achieve symbiotic fixation of nitrogen. So the main example is the use of plants that can fix nitrogen. The symbiotic fixation of atmospheric nitrogen. You can see in the picture attached some biochemical reactions are of major importance in ecology. Biological fixation of nitrogen is one, and with is photosynthesis. There are also some different microorganisms such as archaea, bacteria, and cyanobacteria synthesize nitrogenase and have the possibility of fixing nitrogen in association or not with plants. The best known symbiotic nitrogen fixing association is rhizobal symbiosis. And another example of intercropping is small round balls are visible on this root in the picture attached, and we can they are called the nodules. It is a picture from Philip Inziger, who worked in INRA for eco and soils. So how you can make a transition to agroecology? Agroecology is related to organic agriculture. So when we are discussing about agroecology, we need to know the evolution of organic agricultural land and organic share. You can see the picture attached, but that the organic agricultural practices has always increased throughout the year. This is an estimation in 2018. And here, what is the main continent which use organic production? So the most important is Oceania, and then Europe, Latin America, Asia, North America, and the last is in Africa. Volcanic agricultural land here is we are talking about volcanic agricultural land that are certified, but not only seeing their production. And I think if you have already heard about the plurality of factors driven to transition to agriculture production, the main reason from farmers is personal motivations matter. For example, fear of health risk linked to the use of crop protection products. The other reason is the personal motivations are expressed on the form, local dynamics, farmers cooperatives and the Chamber of Agriculture, for instance, are essential players in the world of agricultural consulting. Farmers also decide to convert to agricultural production also on the basis of macroeconomic and policy data. Some business strategies claim their affiliation to agroecology, but which agroecology? For example, in France, there is currently no label identifying product from agroecology as such, but there are several approaches claim the term or close term directly on their product of their la nouvelle agriculture from a new agriculture, the European Union Organic and the Farm New Zealand or FNZ. Their documentation highlights various forms of commitment in the agroecological transition. Their documentation also highlights various forms of commitments in the agroecological, but they are not specifically mentioned the agriculture, but they are related to the agroecological